I've been watching the escalation recently going on in Canada. I've been following this very, very carefully because I was very interested to see how far the Canadian government would be willing to go. Now, the major concern is that a lot of this stuff, they will do that here. But the good thing is the truckers are showing how effective these protests work. Because 2 years ago, I called the truckers in America stupid because they were demanding a lot of stuff, but they weren't willing to actually strike for it, to leverage their labor against the government and strike for it. Luckily, the Canadian truckers figured this out, because I said, you guys actually hold, an insane amount of power as long as you band together. And luckily, this is happening here, and they're not having outlandish demands. They just don't want vax mandates and vax passports. And it's amazing to see how far the Canadian government is willing to go to not allow this to happen. For something so simple, they just want a basic freedom of bodily autonomy. Now, along the way, they made some horrible missteps that I was watching, like, that when I first heard that their fundraising was on GoFundMe, I was like, wow, you guys are dumb, that's getting banned. And then 2 days after I made that prediction, it got banned, because I was like, this is a right, or not necessarily right, but it's more like populist. You know what I mean? Like, right now, populism is seen on the right, basically. But it was more so, I was like, why would you put an anti-establishment populist movement on a shit-lib website from California? I was like, you're gonna get banned. But the major concerning part is, basically, with Biden in charge, this will come here. Looking at Biden's history, if any of this was to happen here, and I would like a working class revolt here, they will do this in America. Especially given Biden's history. Especially with Obama. And then, like I said, him siding with quote-unquote private companies to go after people they don't like. We already remember the things like the Obama administration did, like indefinite detention and the IRS scandal. So this is why I said the truckers should hold and not budge. But Canada has gone absolutely insane, and now they're trying to, without court order, just government going to private business and saying to freeze people's assets in the protests. And I am telling you guys, you know what? Do it. You're just going to make this worse. They're going to keep making it worse, and it's amazing that they're not getting it. And luckily, it's illuminating what I have been pointing out for a long time, which is the difference between leftists and neoliberals, or shit libs, whatever you want to call them. I always would give examples, but this is a pretty clear example. These are because I always felt it was dishonest always to say leftist and neoliberal like the same thing. The right tends to do that, and I'm like, they're not the same thing. The thing is, the reason it gets muddy is because all neoliberals care about is looking good to other neoliberals, and they will pick whatever position they think is popular on the left. They think the establishment position is popular, so they always go with it, even if it's against things that they said they stand for. That's why you see all these people calling themselves like socialists, and then they side with corporate power structures all the time. And I go, yeah, that's a shit lib. That's not an actual socialist. I have friends that are actual socialists. I see a lot of quote-unquote libertarian socialists backing the Canadian government right now of seizing people's property without court order. And I'm like, how is that in any way a libertarian position? That's like I said, I'm like, no, you don't actually hold those views. You're saying you hold these views because you think it's popular. That's why I said they'll say things like BLM and then support policies that hurt black people. They don't believe a word they say. Anyway, I have to show you this because I'm sure everyone has seen it by the time this goes up, but this is absolutely crazy. And hopefully, maybe this opens the eyes to some of the conservative ink types and the neoliberals who actually want to try and pay attention. Maybe this will open their eyes up to libertarianism, which I think is going to make a hard resurgence within the next decade. Thank God.
As of today, a bank or other financial service provider will be able to immediately freeze or suspend an account without a court order.
Meaning, the government can again go to a quote-unquote private business and seize your assets with no due process. And they're trying to do this through quote-unquote emergency powers. That's why I've always said, a lot of the libertarians, we all know, all this stuff about like Constitution, Bill of Rights, this is all an illusion. The government can come in and go, emergency, your rights are gone. That's not how rights work. But then again, if you look through American history, I know this is Canada, but just giving an example, if you look through American history, I personally can't think of a president that followed the Constitution and Bill of Rights to the letter. They all violated it when it was convenient. So again, this illusion that the government's protecting your rights, they're not. They'll take it in a minute if they don't like what you're doing.
Government institutions will have a new broad authority to share relevant information with banks and other financial service providers. We are broadening the scope of Canada's anti-money laundering and terrorist financing rules.
See, the working class having a protest, a non-violent civil disobedient protest, is terrorism. And this is why I raised the alarm bells after these fucking clowns on January 6th. And I have to go back to this for a second. Was doing what they're doing, these stupid ignorants who wanted to go have a riot, and some actually wanted to engage in terrorism, because there were some. I'm sick of this, there were none. Because if you going in there saying, hang Mike Pence, and you're breaking in there, and you got like zip cuffs on you, going in with bats, that's terrorism. Anyway, but that was the minority of people. But it gave people in like the Biden administration an excuse to bring the war on terror home. And the reason I'm saying this is because when we get there, this is the kind of stuff you are going to see.
So that they cover crowdfunding platforms and the payment service providers they use. These changes cover all forms of transactions, including digital assets.
Now, this could be good because maybe we could, this will wake people up to get your money out of banks. Only keep your, like the minimum amount you have to in banks. I mean, me personally, that's just me personally, right? I protected myself against inflation. Most of my stuff was in equity and crypto. And that was hella worth it because I am in a safe position. Equity, crypto, gold, silver, and I am doing well. But yeah, libertarians, we tend to do we tend to prep like that. But yeah, because these people, that was like, the banks at this point are basically state actors. They're not private businesses. I'm sick of this illusion that a lot of the big corporations are private businesses, and they're not private businesses anymore. And I know a lot of the actual libertarian socialist left agree with me. Because I think it was a fair argument that this stuff, if they can't be private companies and work this closely with government and receive government funding and have these connections to government like this and say they're a private company. At that point, they should be nationalized. Which I was like, that is a fair point. And if you want a privatized bank, you need to cut off everything, or you need to start a new bank. Because what we have now, this is what you get what we have now.
Such as cryptocurrencies. Our banks and financial institutions are already obligated to report to the Financial Transactions and Reports Analysis Centre of Canada, or FINTRAC. As of today, all crowdfunding platforms and the payment service providers they use must register with FINTRAC, and they must report large and suspicious transactions to FINTRAC.
See, aka money going to groups the government doesn't like, or more so, I should say, the government doesn't need right now. Because I already know we're gonna have some people bring up like BLM or something, and I'm like, well, yeah, they're useful. The organization that was taking all that crowdfunding and like just stealing it, they were useful to the state, so they were allowed to just do whatever. Once they're not useful to the state, they're not going to be allowed to get away with that. They will go after them. This is what I tell these neo-libs. I'm like, you guys cheer for the authoritarianism when it's people you don't like. They will use it against you. Like, especially the actual leftist type, some that actually like this because they like seeing their political opponents get attacked. I'm like, they more so go after right and populist movements now because they're in the way. Once they're, sort of quiet and out of the way, they're quieted down, they'll go for you, because anti-establishment left, they go after them hard. I've seen these corporations. They go after them. Like I said, I have friends in these circles. They get banned just as much. It's just that they're a much smaller group.
The illegal blockades have highlighted the fact that crowdfunding platforms and some of the payment service providers they use are not fully captured under the Proceeds of Crime and Terrorist Financing Act. This is about following the money.
It's all about money. Okay, yeah. How out of I mean, they know the reason they're protesting. They know that. But this is just state-funded propaganda. They're trying to make you think it's something else by using, as long as they repeat a certain buzzword enough, it'll stick into your head.
This is about stopping the financing of these illegal blockades. If your truck is being used in these illegal blockades, your corporate accounts will be frozen.
Okay, I like how they won't just comply. Isn't that what they tell everybody else? And the right doesn't get a pass on that because they tell everybody the same thing. The right doesn't get to go just comply. They don't get to say that because they're inconsistent with that. But again, they've been telling the population to just comply and everything will go back to normal. And they've been doing it for 2 fucking years and nothing went back to normal. Why should they believe you and back down? You've shown that you're never going to back down. That it will always inch. It will always inch forward and inch forward and inch forward. So yeah, at this point, backing down doesn't seem like an option because it just seems like the status quo will continue, which it will, where you will keep inching things forward. I wish we had actual protests like this here. And you're like, yeah, it will cause problems. But how else are you supposed to deal with government?
The insurance on your vehicle will be suspended.
Private business. See, the insurance companies are private businesses. In America, they're not because you're forced to get insurance, which is, again, you can't pull the private business thing when the government's forcing you to buy something. But again, I think there's a word for when the private corporations are working with government to go after political opponents. Right? And people are just noticing it now. They've been doing this for decades and decades and decades. People are just starting to notice it now because it's becoming more overt. They're becoming more heavy-handed with it. So it's becoming easier to notice.
The Canadian economy needs them to be doing legitimate work, not to be illegally making us all poorer.
They're not your slaves. They need to do their legitimate work and not make everyone poor. They're free not to work. As long as they're not living off the government, they should be free not to work. Now, again, if you engage in non-violent civil disobedience, you probably will get arrested. That's how it works. But it just came across as kind of, sort of passive-aggressive, the way she delivered that line. Now, there's some complexities with what they're asking for about reversing mandates, mainly when it pertains to crossing the border into America. Because now you're dealing with your demands overlap between 2 countries, so it gets a little more complicated in what they're asking for. But overall, they're just asking to go back. I just think the whole most interesting part about this whole scenario is, well, it's something I've already known and talked about this channel, but it's really becoming easier to sort out who are shit libs and who is the actual left. Because if you're in California, right, you have these people calling libertarian socialists, and they're agreeing with the government demanding private corporations, basically go after people like this at request of the government. If you live in LA like I do, you've met a lot of actual libertarian socialists. They are not people who advocate for this. They're usually the most chill dudes ever. You can find them all over LA. They have their communal living spaces. You go to the valley, they have their communal farms out there. And then, like I said, you have the shit libs, the ones who call themselves that, and then keep siding with government overreach, as long as it's going after who they don't like. And this is why I said neoliberals are probably the biggest group in this country. And the reason I said that the neoliberals are the biggest threat to the country and not the far left or the far right or the right, whatever, is because these posers like this, who don't actually really believe anything, are the ones who cover for the people who are causing the damage. I don't know if you've ever, like I said, been to college. I don't know if you've ever been like to LA, but it's because it's like, besides New York, it's like shit lib central. You will see when politics comes up in a discussion with a lot of these people, maybe, I'm out doing something, it comes up. I talk to a lot of people when I'm out and around, and you'll hear so many like weird perspectives of them saying how progressive they are, but then they're for stuff like this. They're for policies that do the opposite of what they say. As the government ramps up its authoritarianism, it's becoming very, very easy to start differentiating. It's starting to become easier to differentiate where you see the actual leftists and the shit libs. So at least that's a plus to this. And if they go around seizing people's accounts right now, I don't know what they're thinking, but this is going to get substantially worse. It seems like the more you're trying to repress these people, the more they're going to come out and come harder. And they should. Hopefully they don't back down. Hopefully they get what they want. And I would really like to see how far the Canadian government is willing to go to actually stop the working class from making a demand, basically a demand,